Steve Roberts on the mall, the National Mall in Washington, D.C. I don't know if this will end up being a campaign video or a video on someone else's campaign. I don't know. But I'm here to talk today about God. And it's amazing how many people will instantly assume that I have a certain perspective. Oh, he's one of those. Yeah, one of those. Yeah, I'm a believer. But I also don't believe my particular religion is the one true one. I go to church with some people who do, but I'm not one of those. I do 7 patriotic recitations. That is to say, I recite 7 patriotic speeches, documents, things that are important to our national character. The president suggests we should restore the soul of the nation. I wholeheartedly agree. I don't agree with the way he would go about doing it. I know that it's good for small children to believe in something bigger than themselves, and the importance of family has been lost on us. So as we fix our schools, we need to teach children that they are not the center of the universe, and that family is important. We need to help families and welcome families into the process of public education. So I'm going to recite the first 3 minutes or so of Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. He delivered that speech right back here in front of the Lincoln Memorial in August of 1963. You might want to look it up and follow along. I'm not going to recite the whole thing, just the first 3 minutes, and I'm going to finish with, now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. The list of 7 patriotic recitations I do, in chronological order, would be from 1620, the Mayflower Compact, from 1776, the Declaration of Independence. Yes, I can recite it. From 1787, Ben Franklin addressing his fellow patriots at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia on the need for prayer. Then the first 10 amendments to our Constitution, collectively known as the Bill of Rights. I know them. Then Jefferson's letter to the Baptists of Danbury, Connecticut from 1802. A lovely little letter from which we get the first reference to a wall of separation between church and state. Then from November of 1863, Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, which I believe is chiseled in stone in the Lincoln Memorial. And then from August of 1963, Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration of freedom in the history of our nation. 50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languished in the corners of American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. So we've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to fall heir. This note was a promise that all men, yes, black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note insofar as her citizens of color are concerned. Instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check, a check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe there are insufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. So we've come to cash this check. A check that will give us upon demand the riches of freedom and the security of justice. We've also come to this hallowed spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate valley of segregation to the sunlit path of racial justice. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children.